welcome to Breaking into Tech. I'm so excited to have Megan here with us, talking about her time at Sabio. So before we start talking about your time at Sabio, let's talk about who you are. Tell us a little bit about your background, and then we'll continue on with the interview.
So my name is Megan. I grew up in Palm Springs, California. I went into the military about a year after high school, so in 2009. Spent 6 years in there, started off as a sonar tech, volunteered to go to the Middle East, worked at a prison in the Middle East. When I came back, I decided to go to school for nursing. And I actually graduated nursing school at the end of 2019. And we all know what happened that year. So I decided it was time for a new career change. And that's how I ended up attending Sabio.
Yeah, I was looking at your LinkedIn profile before the interview, and I saw a gap between your military experience and your first job, and I was like, "Oh, I bet she went to school. I wonder what she did." And then I was like, "Nursing? That's interesting." So, did you ever get a chance to start working in the nursing field, or were you like in the process of getting a job and the pandemic happened and everything kind of changed?
I was in the process of taking the NCLEX, which is
Okay.
the test you have to pass to actually become a registered nurse. When it all went down, I had just taken it and I was waiting for the results. And I was interviewing at a few different hospitals, and you could see the mess that was happening in the hospitals during that time. And I was just like, no, I already went to war. This is not for me.
Yeah. Yeah, it kind of brings back a little bit of trauma from deploying. So, yeah, I could see that. And so you were like, I have this degree, but now I don't want to go into this field. What am I going to do? Like, how did you figure out that you should become a software engineer?
Well, I've always had a passion for web design and development. I don't know how old you are or anyone in the audience is, but if you've ever heard of a site called Neopets, uh,
Neopets?
Neopets, yeah, it was really big in like the early to mid 90s. And I was obsessed with this site as a kid, like started in sixth grade for me. And you could create your own like user lookups and pet pages using HTML and CSS. And I actually taught myself from scratch how to do HTML and CSS and made crazy pet pages and user lookups and pet lookups and all sorts of stuff. And then in high school, I started creating fan websites for things that I loved. So Harry Potter fan pages, Marvel fan pages. My Harry Potter fan page actually ended up getting like 1,000 unique visitors a month on GeoCities, which was huge. Like, early 2000s for a little high school kid. Like, that was a lot. That was crazy for me. And so I always kind of had that love there. It was just never something that I thought I could actually make a career out of.
Yeah, that's a really cool background. I love hearing about your like passion for like coding and like how you kind of discovered it as a child. And yeah, I'm a little bit older than you, probably about like 5-10 years. So I'm like, I missed that. We had Tamagotchis, if you know what those are.
That was Tamagotchi came out when I was in elementary school, so we might be closer to the same age than we think.
Yeah. No, I was like junior high school. So I mean, we're pretty close, but it's just that much of a difference in technology changing so fast that there's different things that I'm not aware of, but that's really cool. So, how did you find out about Sabio?
Well, I did research into vet tech. Um, Deep dive research into it. I got a recommendation from someone on Reddit to look into that program since I had already used up most of my GI Bill. Just, hey, take a look at this, see if maybe it's something for you. I ended up qualifying for vet tech, but I ended up deciding to use the last bit of my GI Bill to go through Sabio just because it was easier. And since I did have GI Bill left and vet tech is so limited and how many people can use it each year, I'd rather have that opportunity open to veterans if I didn't need it. So I ended up going that route. But Sabio was recommended by Vet Tech, and from all the research I did from all the other places in California, they seem to have the best results. And I was right.
You're like, and the research was correct. You're not the first veteran to mention that Vet Tech was how you found out about Sabio and that they were highly recommended on Sabio on Vet Tech's resource webpage. So that's awesome to hear that that led you to it. But that's kinda how you found Sabio, but how you said you didn't even know that, like, coding was a career that you could do? Like, when you were on vet tech, was it pointing I mean, I know it's technical careers, so was that, like, where you started to just go down the rabbit hole and then you're like, "Oh, I could do this coding thing and use all these things that I enjoyed doing as a child?"
I had already discovered that I wanted to do coding at
Okay.
that point. I actually was originally taking classes to get my CompTIA certificate, and kind of going into IT in that route. And while I was doing it, I was like, no, I'm not so into the hardware side of things. Like, I like the software, the writing of code. I want to make websites. This is what I loved doing when I was in middle school, elementary school, high school. I loved making websites. And I was like, how do I do that? And then it was just like a rabbit hole of how do I do that? And then it was, how do I pay for this?
Exactly.
Which led me down the vet tech rabbit hole, which I didn't even know what coding boot camps were before I fell into that vet tech rabbit hole. And it was just like, I thought I was going to have to go get another 4-year degree and get loans. And I was talking about it on a veterans page of Reddit. And they were like, no, check this out. This is what you need. This is what you got to do. And there's a bunch of veterans on there that had done Sabio or other vet tech programs that were talking about their, or coding bootcamp programs that were talking about their experiences. And I was like, this is what I need to do. So yeah, that's how I ended up
Yeah.
in this
I
lovely
bet
career I have now.
I bet you were so excited after spending all that time in school, getting your nursing degree, and then learning you didn't have to go back and spend 4 more years and, get a bunch of student loans to change your career path. You were able to use your GI Bill for the Sabio's program, and it was a lot shorter. 17 weeks is a lot shorter than 4 years.
Absolutely. I mean, I would say from the day I found out about vet tech and Sabio and decided Sabio was the one for me to my job that I have now, my first coding job was a year and 2 months. I mean, it was quick.
So quick. That's awesome. So let's talk a little bit about why did you decide that Sabio was the right program? Besides being recommended on VetTech, did you attend an info session? Did you do your own research? How did you figure out that Sabio was the right place for you?
I did my own research. I think there's 3 other recommended schools in California, at least was when I was applying through the vet tech program. One of them was I didn't like the languages that they were teaching, like Ruby on Rails, stuff like that. And I was just like, no, I kind of want to do more .NET. I want to do more C Sharp. I don't really, because Ruby is not as in demand as the stuff Sabio teaches. So that knocked them off the list for me. And then it was between that and the other school and vet tech. If you're in the vet tech program, you have a guarantee that you can do that you'll return the money to the VA if they don't get a job within a certain time frame. And this other school did not guarantee that, and Sabio did. And I was like, well, obviously Sabio has more faith in their people getting jobs than this school does. So Sabio is the one I'm going for. And I talked to a couple of other veterans that had done the program and had jobs and were doing really well. And they had nothing but incredible things to say about the program.
That's not surprising. I mean, you're the 15th interview, and everyone talks about how great of an experience is. And you're the second person that's mentioned specifically the guarantee of getting a job and like how they put their money into what they're saying. And so that's really important. It shows the credibility of their program and why so many people do it. And then everyone has such a good experience and they want to come talk to me on the show about it. So that's really awesome. So let's talk a little bit about your time in Sabio. Besides learning to code, because obviously that's what you're there to do, what else did you learn?
Oh, I mean, the resume guidance that they take us through is incredible. They teach you how to set up your LinkedIn, how to make sure that's perfect for employers to look at, the interview process, basically everything you need from like applying to a job to getting the job. They go over in depth, and it's more towards the end of the program that happens, but it was probably one of the best parts of the program. You know, like you can look up coding stuff online and figure it out, but the job prep that they go through with you is so incredible and so in depth. It's worth it to attend Sabio for that alone. I'm pretty sure
Yeah.
I wouldn't be at where I'm at now if it wasn't for that job interview prep.
That's so awesome to hear. So I love that you're talking like obviously they teach you to code, that's really important and like the skills you need. But that's I mean, I think all coding boot camps are gonna teach you how to code. But the fact that they teach you like how to do a resume, how to set up on LinkedIn, prepare you for interviews and help you in the whole process, not just going through the coding. And that's why that guarantees at the end because they put so much time and effort in making sure that you're ready and that you can get a job.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and the strategies that they just give you of how many resumes to send out, what kinds of resumes, how to look for jobs, how to see what jobs are going to be hiring for bootcamp grads, you know, what salary ranges you should be in, what salary ranges you should try and negotiate for. I mean, it was in depth, in detail. And even after you graduate, you still have those resources. Like, Nancy, she's amazing. She did these motivational Monday meetings, and I went to almost every single one until I got a job. I was in France on vacation in a pool or sitting there at motivational Monday, still like trying to make sure that I'm still getting my resumes and stuff in and I'm on the right track and doing everything I need to be doing. I mean, the resources that they give you is just outstanding.
Yeah, and Liliana wrote in the comments that Sabio will not be paid if a vet tech grad does not get a job in a tech position post graduation. So there's a guarantee you're gonna get a job and Sabio. Yeah. Yes, their career services are amazing, and I've interviewed, um, different people who work at Sabio in past interviews, and I'll link to them in the comments after we're done so that you can go check them out because they are so many there are so many great resources. So, let's talk about what did your cohort I know each cohort does a project. What was your cohort's project that you guys were doing?
So we did interrogas, which you know how you go on CNN during an election and they have this live map you can go through and you can see all the polling data and you can hover over different parts of the polling data and you can see how each candidate's doing. It's broken down by color and it's easy to read. Well, we were hired by a client in Mexico that wanted us to be able to build something like that. For Mexico to use or for elections in there. So we had to create a web scraper that would go through and scrape all the data from the public polling information and then pull that all together into the website.
And I was looking at your LinkedIn profile before. Did you work on a similar type program, like as a career? I'm trying to remember from the like your first job was with Amazon and then your second job, it looked like something similar to that, or am I just making something up?
Um, no, so our company page for Interrogas never got properly set up. So I used another company page that was similar called Photo
Okay.
X Photo, um, just so that the resume looked correct and nice on LinkedIn.
Uh, that makes more sense. I was looking at it and I was like, that sounds really similar. So that makes sense. So, so you did that and then you got all the help at the end and it was time to send out resumes. What was the process of getting a job after you graduated like?
It is probably one of the most difficult things that I had ever done in my life. Um, I mean, I was sending out 50 to 120 resumes a day. And not only are you constantly sending out resumes, you need to still be coding, you need to still be practicing, you need to be keeping up on all those skills. So, I mean, I was still working on my own projects just because I wanted to add more projects to my resume as well. Um, And the interviews, I mean, every single time I did an interview, I was like, well, this is a new thing I need to learn and study for and figure out. And then the technical interviews, I mean, some of them were crazy difficult, and I just felt lost and confused. And I would write down everything when I was doing these technical interviews, like anything I didn't understand how to do or that I needed, I would write down there. I knew one of my big weak points was data structures and algorithms, and that was kind of my own fault because I wasn't attending data structures and algorithms workshops that they have. I think it's 2 or 3 times a week they do these, and so I had to get better about making sure I was attending those and doing them, and continue working on leak code in my own time. I mean, I was probably either studying coding or sending out resumes for 8 to 10 hours a day.
So just like the boot camp, you're spending lots and lots of time working on getting a job. It's not like 17 weeks and then woohoo, I'm done. It's like there's still a lot more work to do to be able to get a job.
Yep, and you need to continue developing as a developer as well. Sabio gives you all the resources and tools when you're done to teach yourself and to learn more. I mean, even now that I'm working, I still spend 2 to 3 hours every single day after work teaching myself and learning more, and still working on my own projects because I still have a lot to learn. Um, and I love it too. I absolutely love coding. If I could do this for 14 hours a day, I probably would. It's sometimes I do.
I was gonna say, and I bet you love it because I mean, you could see from a child that it was a passion, and now you get to do that as your job, and then you're always wanting to learn more, but get better in your skill and continue to practice, and so now you get paid to do what you love, which is perfect.
It is.
So it was a lot of work, and you were putting out all the resumes and going to interviews, but eventually you did get a job. So what was that experience like besides being like, woohoo, I finally got a job?
I cried. But so it was wild. I actually had kind of given up internally, and I was just like, I've been at this for like 4 months now. I felt like I was getting nowhere. I had gotten a job offer. Um, I feel like it was like 3 or 4 weeks prior to that, and they rescinded my job offer. And that was heartbreaking. And I had just kind of given up. I had like stopped, and I was just like heartbroken. And I was in England. I travel a lot. And it was like 12:30 at night in England, and this recruiter calls me from Cybercoders, and he's like, "Hey Megan, I was taking a look at your LinkedIn, and I saw your resume, and I thought you'd be a really good fit for this company. I was hoping we could touch bases." And I was like, "Hey, it's 12:30 at night. I'm in England. I'll be back in the States on Monday. Give me a call on Tuesday and let's talk about." And I was in this mentally defeated place, and I was like, "No way this is going to work, but whatever, I'll just try." And on Monday, or on Tuesday, he calls and he tells me about the job. And it's like, if I could dream up a dream job, it was it. And it's mental health care. So it's the 988 crisis hotline for Arizona, Utah, and New York. And so they're telling me that they're really big on mental health care, and um, talking about the different kinds of stacks that they use, which is pretty much everything that I had learned and been working on. So it's JavaScript, C Sharp, .NET, MVC, all of that. And I was just like, wow, this just sounds like an incredible opportunity. And then excitement kind of sparked up again, but I still didn't want to get my hopes up. Um, so we talk and we chat about it, and they set me up for 3 interviews in a week. And I had no other interviews or anything else going on because, like I said, I'd given up. So I just fully dedicated myself because I had all of that week to study. And then the next week, I had my 3 interviews. It was like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday done. And that whole rest of the week, I was just like, this is the dream. If I can get this job, I will be so happy. Because I'm super big into mental health and care like that, and it just sounded so perfect. And So I dived in. I studied. The recruiter was giving me all these hints and stuff. He's like, "There's gonna the technical portion is gonna be all C sharp," and C sharp was like my weakest language. So I actually went online and was like, "What projects can I do to get better at C sharp?" And one of them was like, make a tic tac toe game. And so I spent like an entire week making this tic-tac-toe game. And then like after I made the tic-tac-toe game, it was like, okay, now I need to figure out OOP. I need to get better at this. So then I implemented tons of OOP stuff. I think my tic-tac-toe game is like close to 1,000 lines of code. It's probably needs to be completely rewritten, but I learned so much just like I need to do this project, I need to figure it out. And first two interviews, I do great. I'm very personable. I'm good with people. I could answer all their questions. The study guide that they give you for interview questions, I would say almost every single question they asked me was on that interview question study guide. So I had it memorized. I knew what I was getting into. I knew the answer to the questions. And then we did the technical portion, and it was all C sharp. And it was like every single thing that I had made in that tic tac toe game was things that they wanted me to code for this technical portion. And I don't know, it's just like that moment where the stars align, everything is perfect, everything is great, and it was exactly as it was meant to be. And the next week they offered me the job.
Yay! Oh, that must have been so hard to get the offer and then have it rescinded and then just kinda be in that, like in that dark place where you're like, "Ugh, I did all this work and now I'm just trying to figure out what's next." So, yeah. And I love that you talked about how you were like, "Well, I have this interview and, like, I don't have the energy to, like, do anything else, like, try and get more. I'm just gonna focus, work really hard, study," and that way you nailed it and you got the job, so that's really exciting.
It was, and I'm beyond happy. I love my job. It's a nonprofit. They are incredible people. If I ever need to take time off or anything, they're super relaxed about it. They know that I travel a lot, so they're fine with me traveling. It's fully remote. It's great. I couldn't be happier where I'm at.
That's so awesome. Someone in the comments said, "Can we work 2 remote jobs as developer?" I mean, I guess it depends
It
on the company, right?
it depends on your contract.
Yeah.
So my contract that I have with my company, I'm not even allowed to do volunteer work without their approval. Um, So definitely no second jobs. Um, some companies will allow you to do that, and I know there is a thing right now called, was it overemployed, where people are developers and they're having two, three jobs, but a lot of these people are getting caught and being fired. So it's something you should bring up with HR if that's something you want to do, unless you want to risk losing your job.
Yeah, that's so true. And I know that a couple interviews back, Daniel was on, and he is like starting his own business on the side, and he works for a company, but he was very open with his company about like what he was doing. And so it definitely has to do with like what your contract says and what your job says. So it is possible, but it's definitely something that you don't want to try and do without the companies knowing, because if you get caught, then you could go from 2 jobs to 0 jobs. So that's definitely something that's important to look at your contract. So it doesn't matter what the time zones are, it has to do with the contract. The follow-up question was what if it's different time zones? Like it has to do with what is written in the contract with the employer that you work with. So it is possible and you could do it. It's just you have to make sure that your agreement with your company fits in with what they say. So So let's get back to your story and um let's say if you had a time machine and you could go back to like as you're graduating Savio, what either interview tip or just overall job process, getting a job process tip would you give yourself?
I I did this. Everyone has different methods for when they're putting out resumes. And I did what a lot of people do, just the spray and pray. Just apply to every single thing you see if you even feel like you're slightly qualified for it. And I think part of that is what burned me out so quickly. And I think I would have been a bit more selective with the different places that I was applying for, just to make sure, I could buckle down on those specific things that I needed for the interviews, and made sure I knew, because I was at the point where sometimes I was doing 12 interviews a week.
Wow.
And
That's a
I
lot.
think I burnt myself out on that. And it's hard to study for 12 different interviews. Whereas when I just had the one, I was able to buckle down, really focus on specifically what was in that interview and what the recruiter was kind of helping me out with and telling me what I needed to know. And that's when I finally got the job. So I think I would have slowed maybe that down a bit and been a bit more selective.
Yeah, so spend a little bit less time sending out resumes and more time focusing on like preparing for the interview part. Especially like you talked about how you were a little weak in C sharp, so you did the tic-tac-toe game and then you're like doing the technical interview. You're like, "Oh, I know the answer to all these questions because you spent all that time looking at what what C sharp could do, and so you knew the ins and outs of it." And so 12 interviews, not only is that like a lot to know, it's like mentally a lot of work just to prep for the interviews and go through the interviews, and then that's a lot. I mean, I interview people, that's like my job, and I'm like, at 12, that's a lot. I've done like 6 in a week, and I was like, "Oh my goodness." And that was me doing the interviews, which I think is a little bit easier than being interviewed by people. Depends on everything's, but that's a lot. That's a lot of interviews. So I think that's really good advice to take your time, like slow down, be selective, learn a little bit more about the companies instead of just being like, oh, that sort of looks interesting, and then sending it out, just so that you don't get 12 interviews in 1 week and you can focus on the few. Because it wasn't that you weren't getting called back, it was that you were kind of getting called back too many times and you didn't have enough time to prepare.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
that's really good advice. What advice would you give someone who is considering a career in software engineering?
Go for it. I mean, it's not for everyone. It's absolutely not for everyone. If you love slamming your head against a problem over and over and over again until it's fixed, this is a career for you. And I mean love, not like, oh, I can stand it. No, like that's like something you enjoy doing. Then this is definitely a career for you. Like I'm the kind of person where I have a problem and I can't stop thinking about the problem. Like I'll be working on something for work, or even when I was at Sabio, and I would walk away to go make lunch, or I was just getting too frustrated with it and I needed to take a moment, and I'd still be working through that problem, and I'd be like halfway falling asleep, and I'd suddenly realize my why I couldn't figure out the code, and I would get up at like 10 o'clock at night and be like, it works, it's fixed. And that it was like a rush that I would get every single time I solved one of those hard problems. So if you love that, absolutely the career for you. Go for it, do it. You'll never be happier because there's no end of hard problems to solve.
Yeah, I'm an introvert, and that's one of the things that I do. I do a lot of freelance writing, and the reason I can write my articles so fast is because I spend like, lots of hours thinking about how the article's going to come together, and so I'm kind of like working it out in my head, trying to figure it out. And I feel like that makes sense with coding. Like you're stuck at a problem and you're like your brain just needs to like kind of look at it from different angles in the background, and then all of a sudden, of course it's the middle of the night, that's when you're like, oh, I got it, I have to get up and write it down. Yeah, I relate to that. That is very much like me, so I understand that.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
And so the last question that I have is, where do you see yourself in 2 to 5 years? Do you see yourself still growing at the company that you're at? Or do you have dreams for starting your own tech company? Where do you see yourself in the future? Or
Well,
do you not know?
if you would have asked me this like 2 weeks ago, I would have told you like I was gonna go do AWS. I've always had an absolute fascination um, with the cloud and how that all works and the computing. But my boss just sat down on me. We do one-on-ones every 2 weeks, and he asked me the same thing, and I was like, "Yeah, I really love AWS. I'm actually working in my free time to get AWS certification because Amazon's canceling their free certification program starting next month. So if you want to get your free AWS certification, they have classes for free you can take. So I'm powering through that right now. I told my boss that, and he's like, we're actually talking about in the background doing cloud architecture.
Wow.
If this is something you're really interested in, we'll send you to go do classes and learn how to do this. So when we're ready to expand into the cloud and start doing that, you'll be our go-to person. And I mean, that just made me beyond happy. So yeah, I could see myself sticking with where I'm at. I mean, they're really open to like, if you want to learn something, you can grow and go do it. Most of the people that I work with have been there for 5, 6, 7 years, for a very long time, just because they do give you those opportunities. We're allowed to go to 3 conferences a year, paid, your flight paid, your hotel paid, the conference paid. And it could be software engineering related or mental health related, because they want us to understand all aspects of the company, even as software engineers. And it's just kind of a really, really incredible company to work for.
Yeah, that sounds awesome, and I love that you have the opportunity to grow in, like, coding and, like, you already know that you wanna do cloud-based stuff, and when you told them that, they're like, "Oh, actually, that's something we're thinking about." So it's not like you have to stay you can change roles, and you don't even have to leave the company, so that's awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time and for sharing about your experience with Sabio. I love learning a little bit more about you, and I'm just glad we got to do this interview.
Absolutely. It was great. You were fantastic. And hopefully, I'll see you again soon.
Yeah, thanks.